Planning and Zoning Commission has given the green light to a change that could impact thousands of properties in the city. Connor Trett breaks down what this could mean for property owners and the makeup of neighborhoods in the future.
City of Springfield's Planning and Zoning Commission has been working to address what they call missing middle housing. Through the city initiative Forward SGF, a rezoning was proposed for just over 4,500 parcels of land in Springfield. This allows for the construction and development of single-family homes, duplexes, and townhomes in less dense areas. Tonight, the commission voted unanimously to amend that proposal. This new version concentrates those changes to areas closer to major streets.
It's kind of meant to be around higher density roadway traffic and on the edges of neighborhoods to protect the integrity of the inside of the neighborhood.
Residents spoke tonight hoping that the rezoning came with protective guardrails to still allow for home ownership.
In 3 of the neighborhoods that are affected in this proposal, between 60 and 70% of the single-family homes or single-family properties would be changed to an RMX1 zoning. That scale of change without guardrails could result in a rapid influx of rental housing. These neighborhoods are already hovering around a 50-50 owner-renter balance.
Jennifer McClure, who's on the Planning and Zoning Commission, says that this plan opens the door to add much-needed housing options in Springfield, and that having multiple different types of housing creates a healthy market.
It creates a situation in which individuals can rent at rates where they can own. That can become a better ladder and path to home ownership. So I think it's important not to villainize any particular type of housing, but to recognize that ecosystem and interrelationship and the importance of more housing units overall.
In Springfield, Connor Trett, KY3 News.